everyone, my name is Shelby and this is the YouTube series where I reveal what's inside these mystery pottery molds I found on Gumtree. This is part 19 and this mold is a smaller size. It's got 2 holes up the top and it says G573. Flipping it over, on the bottom it says that it is 2 Cute Cows by George's Bulldogs in Portland, Oregon. So opening it up, it looks like one cow is sitting upright and one's sort of curled up, and it's also got the indents on the ears, which I'm really happy about because they are quite small. I'm very nervous about how fragile those little ear details are going to be, so having those indents means that the excess air and clay can escape when I pour them up. But yeah, it'll be nerve-wracking to pull these out and to then paint them with such small little details. So I poured them up, let them set for about 15 minutes and then tipped out the excess. I waited a couple of hours before splitting the 2 halves and revealing what's inside. So I made sure that the pieces were still a little bit wet, and that's just because of how tiny they are, but opening them up, they are so sweet. I love the detail of the movement. You can see where each of their legs is sort of resting. You can see the little hoof details. It's got a little fringe. I can't believe you can actually see this little cute fringe. That's just adorable. So I go in and I gently cut the base, that pouring spout off, and they are so much more fragile than I expected. I very, very cautious holding these. So I go in and gently sponge them. I'm just going to sponge off that line and then I'm going to bisque fire these so that they hold their shape, so that when I paint them, I don't have to be super cautious. And as I was sponging, point and case made an ear chipped off straight away. I didn't even have any pressure on it. I was holding it so gently. You can see how gently I'm doing this. The ear just didn't like any pressure on it at all and snapped off. So I ended up pouring a couple of these. The good thing with the plaster molds is you can use them again and again until they essentially deteriorate. Plaster lasts a really long time as long as you're looking after it. It's not forever ending, but you can use it again and again. So with that one I broke, I put it in my recycle bucket. This is called Reclaim, so I'll reclaim this clay later on once it gets more full, and I can use it again for slip or whatever I want to make with it. So that goes in that bucket and it's quite satisfying and it gets all smushed down. But yeah, so the molds can get used again and again. So I poured a few batches and made sure that I sponged them really, really carefully so that I could get that line as invisible as possible, and then put them through the kiln for that bisque to dry them out, and that way it holds their shape and they're a little bit stronger. They're not I guess like drop proof or pressure proof because they aren't completely solid yet, but they're at least stronger for me to actually paint them and hold them and I guess handle them and get these details on them without the fear of snapping little ears off. So that is a lot more of a relief to paint when you're not worried about breaking little appendages off. So with these cows, I'm going to do 3 different colorways. So one's like a lighter brown that's got sort of more like a warmer tone. One's a darker, deeper brown that's got sort of more of that cooler brown tones. And then I'm going to do one that black and white, classic sort of cow look. So the idea behind these is I kind of was reminded of 2 little Highland cows. So they kind of, with the fringe, it just instantly reminded me of those really furry, fluffy, cottagey Highland cowies that are just so adorable. So I'm doing them as sort of pairs. So yeah, I'll go in with those colours. I mix some colours up to match. So I paint everything with 1 coat first, and that's sort of like the undertone, and then I've mixed up like either a darker or warmer colour that goes on top. So I've got my usual brushes, and then I've got this tub of brushes up the top of my shelf that are actually from my nana, because she used to paint sort of landscapes. So she's kindly given me her brushes because she no longer does that, but I grabbed one of the fan brushes out, and the idea with the fan brush is that it's quite splayed out. So I'm using the texture of the fanned out brush to sort of add a texture of hair, creating this effect of just like random furriness all over the cows. So I do that with the 2 brown sets. So I often use my skin, which is probably not a good thing, but to dab the excess paint off my brushes. The reason I use my skin is because my bench and my sponge don't quite get the right amount off the brush. So the idea of dabbing it is to get rid of a lot of the moisture so that I can give this really sort of rough texture, and so that I have the right amount of paint on the brush that I want. I just find that my skin absorbs a lot of the moisture and doesn't take all the moisture away. So when I do it on the bench, it doesn't take enough moisture away, but when I do it on a sponge, it almost adds moisture, because usually my sponges are quite damp for cleaning my brushes out on. So using my skin is the best option at the moment, but I wouldn't recommend it, because I don't know whether it's like bad for you to actually be putting paint on your hand. So yeah, that's why I use that technique. I do get people giving me unsolicited advice all the time now, which is something that I'm not used to. Just sort of saying that I should do things differently, use different brushes, all this type of stuff. And a lot of the time, this unsolicited advice comes from people that have used either acrylics or watercolor or another paint medium. The thing about underglaze is that it is made up differently to other paints because it needs to withstand the temperatures in a kiln. So it needs to have the chemical makeup that it's not going to burn out at extreme temperatures. So with that, it means that the paint is a little bit thicker. It's a little bit different to use than your watercolor. This paintbrush that I'm using now, I would usually use this for watercolor to do the thinnest lines, like as thin as the grey lead you can see on the cow, is what I can achieve with that brush. But when I'm using it for underglaze, it's a lot thicker. It does take a lot of practice to get it really thin. I always get questions about people asking me how to get lines really thin with underglaze. It's honestly practice, finding the right brush. Usually the longer thin tips are best for line work, but yeah, it does take a long time to get used to the way the underglaze works and knowing how much to apply to get the right consistency and deepness, richness of your color. So yeah, that's my little TED talk on underglaze and why it's a little bit different to a normal paint that you can get, just to paint a normal canvas. So I'm just gonna zone out for a sec because it's mostly just painting again and adding the last little details to these cows, and then I will chime back in when it's time to glaze.
Saw beauty in the selflessness of giving, heard sorrow in the songs of 1,000 merchantmen, singing just to fill their emptiness. New wisdom was a choice of the moment, there for you to be now and not just to become. I put myself down just by looking up. I felt love from the caring of a woman. I felt the loss of a fallen child underneath the sun. On the day I woke, the soulless one. With my heart open, without the fear of pain that may find its way in. And if it did, I'd do the same all again. A witness flow of poetry in the ocean, and bet along till my eyes met the lining of the sky. Fulfilled enough to never question why. And I showed myself upon my own reflection of a world I'm creating that's affecting everyone. On the day I woke, I saw us all as one. You sang to me make these lyrics as if they were written to the beating of my heart. If you can feel its pulse, it's not too late to start. But it's not my place for me to offer lessons or give advice to those who have their own minds. But to share with you the simple things I find. Oh, but still you held this message in your eyes. In a promise to myself I would express it, well, not knowing if I'm capable or if I would respond. On the day I woke and I saw a song as well.
So with these pieces, they actually went through the Bisque fire twice. For the first time to sort of set the shape in so I could paint them, and then the second time to set the underglaze in place so that the glaze doesn't make it run or anything like that. So I then, once they were bisqued the second time and the underglaze is set in place, I glazed them. So I just did this by dipping them in. So because it has the hole on the bottom, it made it easy to hold to dunk them in. And they were really simple to glaze these ones up. And I just sponged down the base to make sure that all the excess glaze was off the bottom, because you can't have any glaze on the bottom of your pieces in the kiln, because it's kind of like baking a cake and putting the icing on the bottom of the cake in the oven. You just wouldn't do it because you'd have a sticky mess everywhere. So that's why you never glaze the bottom of your pieces, because otherwise it will stick. So I packed the kiln and they all went up on the top little layer there. Watching this back, that little fly on my back is really annoying me, but this kiln load went overnight, and here's me opening it in real time again. And happy dancers, because those colors are looking amazing, and that mug is just standing out to me as well. But I'm in love with these cuties. There's like a little herd in my kiln watching over all the goodies to make sure they're doing okay. So I pull the whole shelf out to unpack them, and just having a quick inspect, they look amazing. But I'll do a walkthrough now of all the colorways. So first up, we have that darker brown, which has got the cooler tones. I really love it. I think it's really sweet. It's really subtle. I love the fanning of the brush, how you've got those pops of that lighter and darker tones coming through, and it does look really textured. I didn't think the texture would come out given I was brushing it on so light. I think it looks really gorgeous, and the little details make them look so sweet. I was a little bit nervous with the eyes and the sort of mouth details, that they weren't going to stand out enough, and on the latter that they were going to stand out too much and be kind of creepy, but I think they are just the perfect balance of cuteness. I'm really happy with them. I think they could have gone the other way if I added too much detail, but here's the warmer tone. I actually love the deep hues of the orange that are shining through on this brown tone. I love the texture again. It's come out so cute, and I love how the hair on the fringe is really, really subtle, but really complements it well. Yeah, I'm really stoked with these. I think they're going to be really sweet to mix and match. I think my favorites though are these black and white cowies. They're so cute. The little fringe with the flicks of hair, the pink, just giving it a really dairy cow look. I really like it. I like how random the splodges are, and how some of the speckle of the clay has come through to sort of add to that black and white finish. They're just really lovely. I actually used the same pink for all the ears and snouts on all the cows, but what I did was I added like a pink with a soft brown to sort of, so it wasn't like a jarring pink, it was just a complementary pink, and I actually love how it turned out on all of the cows. But yeah, it's such a cute little herd. I'm really in love with this mould. I think it's such a little sweet item. I can definitely see it in a garden or a plant pot, or even just on a little shelf in the kitchen. They're really, really adorable. Don't forget to let me know what you think in the comments, and make sure to like and subscribe for part 20.